This year, Sony has made it pretty easy to decide what TV you would want. At least that's what you would think. The Bravia 8 versus the Bravia 9. Is the 9 going to be better than the 8 because it's just a higher number? Or is the 8 actually better than the 9? Well, I have a couple of opinions on that I will share with you in this video. How's it going, everybody? If you guys are new to the channel, my name is KG. I've been reviewing TVs for quite a while, and I've been comparing TVs for the last 3 years. On this channel, I judge TVs on how they look out of the box. And I really think this is important to do so because I don't think a lot of people calibrate their TVs. Of course, I make sure to turn off all the necessary stuff like eco mode and anything that would hinder the TV's brightness. Now, with the comparisons in mind, I put a big emphasis on HDR. We make sure that we run nothing but HDR content most of the time. I will touch on SDR somewhat. These videos will of course be in HDR whenever they can, so make sure you switch to HDR if you haven't already to watch this video. Now, if you've seen one of my comparison videos between an OLED and an LCD, you know the strengths and weaknesses of LCD versus OLED. But if you haven't, I would say that's okay because the Bravia 9 at times does buck some of these trends. I think that the Bravia 9 is probably the best mini LED I've seen at performing in dark areas. And what I mean by this is that oftentimes you could see an LCD TV sort of dim down the highlights when we get into darker scenes, more challenging scenes. Does an LCD struggle with this still like the Bravia 9? At times, sure, yeah, but it really does a good job most of the time that I've thrown things at it where I see some highlights really get presented to me in a great fashion. Now, this is with the caveat of it being on medium local dimming. If you put it on high local dimming, you can kiss all that stuff goodbye because it doesn't perform the same way. I honestly do not recommend putting this at high. I can understand putting it at high if you want to get rid of all the blooming that you possibly can on the TV. Sure, then you can go ahead and do so. But trust me, you live with some of the blooming and you get just a really amazing performance out of the Bravia 9 as it sits in the medium mode. But the moment you switch local dimming to high, you're going to eat up a lot of those details, and a lot of your highlights that were so bright before end up not being that. So yeah, you want to be very careful with the local dimming setting. I would understand if you want to put it in high, like I said, just to eliminate the blooming, but trust me, medium is the way to go with this TV. So in that fashion, it does a really good job with bright scenes in dark areas, way better than I did with other mini LED TVs. However, you still do see the contrast difference. It's clear, it's night and day at times. The Bravia 8 sticks out as the better looking TV in a lot of cases because of contrast. And you'll see that in scenes like this when you can clearly see the Bravia 8 just has so much more detail. And that's where it goes down to, what do you like out of your TV? Are you looking for just raw brightness, or are you looking for the best picture quality possible in terms of clarity and detail? Because the Bravia 8 is going to give that to you over the Bravia 9. It really is. I mean, yeah, they have the same processor, but you're talking about the contrast level of the OLED TV is going to shine through over the Bravia 9 a lot of times. So yeah, the Bravia 8 will look like the clearer, sharper picture overall because it is an OLED TV. And I think the Bravia 9 does better when it's by itself, but when it is next to something like the Bravia 8, for example, there are actually times where it does appear to be a little bit flat compared to the Bravia 8, like you can see in this scene right here. So I know there's going to be people who don't like me comparing the 8 to the 9 because the 9 is more expensive than the 8, but I will say that the things that you're seeing in the 9 can be applied to the 7 as well. So if you want to save money and you can't quite get to the 9 and you like everything that you see from the 9, you can go with the 7 and get very similar results. It won't have as good of backlight control, and you're not going to have as good of a viewing angle with the TV, but brightness wise is going to be very similar. A lot of the strengths and weaknesses when it comes down to LCD and OLED is going to be very similar in that regard. So you can still get a Bravia 7 if you like what you see with the Bravia 9 over the Bravia 8, for example. You're pretty much going to get almost the same experience, give or take some things. All right, now let's go to HDR impact. And what this will be is kind of like the wow factor that your TV is going to give you in HDR. Highlights, are they going to be presented in a bright manner? These are the things that we look at with HDR in mind. And both TVs can do a really good job with HDR impact. But the Bravia 9 does a better job with HDR impact. And that is very clear when they are side by side, especially in higher graded movies. You will notice this. I still think that the contrast difference will give you the win for the Bravia 8 in most movies. So there is that. And when it comes down to HDR impact, yeah, the Bravia 9 still is going to be the winner there. Funny enough, though, in some scenes, there are scenes where the Bravia 9 lacks definition, lacks detail, and it won't look as impactful as the Bravia 8, which is weird. But this is just how tone mapping works, and for whatever reason, sometimes you just do not get the same result, especially when you're dealing with two different panel technologies. And it's clear to me that still the Bravia 8 is the much better HDR experience in darker movies. In brighter movies, nope, the Bravia 9 is going to give you the better experience overall in terms of HDR impact. But there's another factor that I didn't talk about yet, and that's those of you that watch it purely in vivid mode. You don't really care about the creator's intent. You just want to watch your TV in vivid mode, no matter what. Those people do not get the Bravia 8. Don't get any mid-range OLED. You guys are wasting your time with those if you are a vivid mode watcher. Trust me, you're better off even getting the Bravia 7 over the Bravia 8 in this regard. The Bravia 9 is like one of the best vivid mode watching TVs that I've seen to date. They do a really strong emphasis on just bringing out all the brightness that you can possibly get without sacrificing too much contrast. It does a really good job of this. And so I think a lot of people will like the vivid mode that's coming out of the Bravia 9. And some of you guys I know do watch movies in vivid mode. Not something that I personally recommend, but if you like what you like what you like. And here's an example of that on the screen here. So you can see that when we go into vivid mode, yeah, there's a night and day difference there. And this is where I can't recommend a OLED to you if we're talking about you're only watching in vivid mode. I think that you're just better off going with an LCD TV in these cases. And here's a non-movie example of this. When you're just looking at HDR content, this looks like a highlighter color on the screen right here on the Bravia 9, where the Bravia 8 can't display this brightness level. And, it's doing a really good job of holding the color, right? But it's just not able to get to that brightness level. And so that is one of the things that I did notice when we were in vivid mode. Vivid mode is not really very feasible on the Bravia 8. You have it there as an option, sure. It just doesn't really give you no impact like it does on the Bravia 9. So that's that. That's vivid mode for you. Now, one area where you will see a strong difference between the Bravia 9 and the Bravia 8 will be shadow detail. The Bravia 8 at times can look a bit crushed, I'll be honest with you. And I think at times it probably is crushed. The Bravia 9, on the other hand, is like the complete opposite of that. It seems like at times it's maybe brighter than it should be in the shadows. And I don't know what the exact level should be because I don't have a reference monitor to judge. It just appears that way. It just appears like I'm seeing more than I should be seeing. Like if I'm playing a horror game, for example, there is really no sense of I'm scared because I don't know what's hiding in the shadows. That is lost on the Bravia 9. But with the Bravia 8, yeah, it's crushed a little bit. It still does seem like I can see into the shadows good enough where this is what I should be seeing. Where again, the Bravia 9, I feel like I'm seeing more than I should be seeing. Maybe that's just a total difference between LCD and OLED when it comes down to Sony and their philosophies, right? I don't know. It used to be where you could see more on a Sony OLED. This year, it seems like we're crushing a little bit on the Bravia 8. I don't mind it. It reminds me a little bit of the LG OLEDs in that sense, but it is something that I wanted to throw out there. You are crushing a little bit on the Bravia 8, where with the Bravia 9, it's kind of like the opposite of that. With settings, some of this can be tweaked. And what's better really depends on what you like picture quality wise. I can't make that decision for you. I could just tell you what I see. Now, one area where the Bravia 9 is much better than the Bravia 8 is going to be in the inbuilt sound. The sound on this TV for the Bravia 9 is incredible, one of the best sound systems I've personally ever heard, and it really does fill the room with sound. I think that most people won't need to get a sound bar with both of these TVs, perhaps, but for sure, with the Bravia 9, you don't need anything for most people. Now, a lot of you guys are probably going to want to upgrade either way, but if you're just looking for something that's the total package, the Bravia 9 has that more so than the Bravia 8. But the Bravia 8 speakers aren't really a slouch. they're just not as good as the Bravia 9. And the Bravia 9 is just on another level when it comes down to their speakers. All right, really quickly, before I get into gaming, I want to touch on sports because sports watching was one of the examples where I thought the Bravia 9 did better than the Bravia 8. As is the case with most LCD TVs over an OLED TV, people usually like to watch sports on a bright setting in a bright room. So I think for that experience, it's definitely the Bravia 9, and I had a better experience in that regard on the Bravia 9 than the Bravia 8. The Bravia 8 also does have a tendency to dim down a little bit when watching content for a very long period of time, and this same thing can be carried over to game mode as well. I noticed it there too. So let's get into gaming. But first, if you guys are enjoying this content, please consider buying from my affiliate links in the description below when you decide on buying your next TV. I sourced both of these TVs for comparison, and if you want to help me get more TVs in the future, clicking that link before you buy is going to be the best way to do that. So thank you guys so much for your support. Let's talk about game mode. Well, I think there is going to be cases where you choose the Bravia 9 over the Bravia 8, but most of you are probably going to want to choose the Bravia 8 over the Bravia 9, and here is why. If you're playing a game, you're going to be in a dark area at some point in time. And when you are in a dark area, it is not a very great experience on the Bravia 9. Can it be done? Sure. Yeah, it's not bad for a mini LED TV. In context of for a mini LED TV, it's not bad. But if you see it next to an OLED, it's not great. And that's where the Bravia 8 will be better than the Bravia 9. And not to mention, you're talking about fast fluid motion. You're not really going to run into any issues with ghosting or smearing. There's very minimal amounts of that on the Bravia 9, by the way. It does a really good job of that. Again, for a mini LED TV, I have to put an emphasis on that. But still, it's not the response time that you're looking at from an OLED TV. So in faster paced games like Call of Duty, for example, you are definitely going to want to choose an OLED over an LCD in most cases. If you're playing slower paced games, maybe more story driven games where you're going to be in a lot of brighter areas, sure, you can definitely get this TV to look very bright. And I have seen so many examples where this is going to be the brightest TV in the room. I honestly wouldn't give up the contrast difference to get this. And if I wanted this experience, I would just step it up to the S95D because it's almost as bright at times as the Bravia 9 in game mode. I just cannot go and highly recommend a Bravia 9 for game mode personally, or any LCD. I can understand that you guys want to avoid the whole burn-in issue. So OLED, dealing with something that could happen on a rare basis. LCD TVs, you're dealing with something that happens on a daily basis. Even though you have a good game mode, you're still going to run into these issues with flash lighting and not being able to see light sources be lit up as properly as they are supposed to be lit up. That's going to be an issue on the Bravia 9. On the Bravia 8, no issue at all because it's an OLED-based TV. And I think, once again, we have an example of the OLED TV being better than the LCD TVs for gaming specifically. So what do you think, Bravia 9 or Bravia 8? Tell me which one you guys are choosing in the comments below. I would love to hear your answer. Now, if you still need help finding a TV, I suggest you watch this comparison right here. It's probably going to help you out a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.